Then we have Hansindu, who is here to show us how to integrate security to your web application. Hello Hansindu, over to you.
Shadini, can you see the screen now?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Hi guys, I am Hansindu Maniyangama, third year cybersecurity undergraduate and also a member of MS Club of SLIIT. So, I know you have wait here a long time, so just give me 15 of to like 10 to 15 minutes. I will make this quick. So, I'm going to tell you how to implement security to web application during software development lifecycle phases. And basically, one of most critical vulnerability like SQL injection or scripting in OS top 10. Like I will explain those later. So I know you are giving less focus on the security side. So from now on, try to give some more focus on the security side. It will be benefit for you in the future. So I'm going to explain like software development lifecycle in development phase, definition and design phase, development phase, deployment phase, maintenance and operation phase, and OS top 10 in SQL injection. So all you think that you are all considering about security only in last phase. That means you think it's to be really enough that if you implement security in last phase, but you know you are all wrong. Before application development starts, a proper software development lifecycle must be defined. Where security is inherent at each stage. So, do you remember software development lifecycle in software processing module? Like software processing modeling module in first year, second semester. So, like I was saying, in your software processing modeling module, you have learned phases like planning, analysis, design, implementation, testing, and integrations, and maintenance. So, this testing framework consists of activities that could take place then before development begins, during definition and design, during development, during deployment, and during maintenance and operations. So, before moving further, I should say this: the intent of this guide presentation is to suggest a development model. So that you should follow it according to your project process. Unlike others, with the time limit also, I couldn't show you a demo. So I hope you will gain something from these things. So what is the first phase one before development begins? So actually, what is this secure software development cycle? So it's a collection of best practices focused on adding security to the standard software development life cycle. So when you're creating this secure software development life cycle process, it requires dedicated effort at each phase of the life cycle. So this requires a mind shift on a part of your development team. So focusing on security at each phase of the project instead of just focusing on the functionality. I mean that you have to focus on each stage about security. So what are the reviews and policies and standards? So we need to ensure that there are appropriate policies, standards, and documentation in place. So documentation is extremely important as it gives development teams guidelines and policies that they can follow. So people can do the right thing. I will tell you an example. If the application needs to be developed in Java, so it is essential that there is a Java secure coding standard. So if the application needs to use cryptography, it is essential that there is a cryptography standard. So like that, by documenting the common and mostly common and predictable issues, there will be a fewer decisions that need to be made during the development process. So what is development measurement and metrics criteria and ensure traceability? I know topic is long. I will explain. This means it is essential to define the metrics before development begins. So as there may be need to modify the process in order to capture the data. Let's move to the phase 2. during definition and design. So, what is review security requirements? There are more security. There are a lot of security requirements. User management, mostly when you are building your application, authentication, authorization, data confidentiality, integrity, accountability, session management. These are very much important to your project security requirements. So these security requirements define how an application works from a security perspective. For example, if there is a security requirement that states that users must be registered before they can get access to the white paper section of the website, does this mean that the user must be registered with the system, or should the user be authenticated? Like that, you should ensure that requirements are absolute as possible. So next step is review design and architecture. So application should have a documented design and architecture. So this documentation can include models like textual documents and other similar artifacts. It is essential to test these artifacts to ensure that design and architecture enforce the appropriate level of security as defined in the requirements. I will explain that in or example also. Like if it is defined that the design calls for authorization design to be made in multiple phases, so it is appropriate to consider the central authorization component. So if the application is performing data validation at multiple phases, it is appropriate to develop a central validation framework. So you can create and review UML models. So you can use these UML models to confirm with the system designers and like your team, your system designers, and exact understanding how this application works. So if you have found a weakness, you can go to alternative approaches. So that's why we need to create and review UML models. So what is that? Create a review threat models. So this method to develop realistic threat scenarios. So you can analyze the design and architecture to ensure that these threats have been mitigated, accepted by business, or assigned to a third party. So when identified threats have no mitigation strategies, you can revisit the design and architecture of the system architect to modify the design. Let's move on to the next phase, during development. So during this phase, so if the design and architecture was not proper, the developer, you will be faced with many decisions. Like if there are insufficient policies and standards, you will face with more difficulties. So what will be the first step? Code walkthrough. So this is a high-level look at the code during which developers can explain the logic and flow of the implemented code. So this code walkthrough will allow you the your team to obtain a general understanding of the code. So that will allow as developers to explain why certain things were developed the way they were. So you should take note that this code walkthrough is not to perform a code review, but to understand a high level the flow, the layout, and the structure of the code that makes up the application. So like code review, in this step, tester can now examine the actual code for security defects. So I have provided here a checklist. You can see business requirement for availability, confidential, integrity. Like these steps, checklist, you can use it against static code review validation. So in most times, static code reviews produce far higher quality returns than any other security review method and rely last on the skill of your as developer. So let's see what is phase 4 during deployment. This is very interesting phase. Application penetration testing. You can do penetration test the application after it has been deployed because it provides an additional check to ensure that nothing has been missed. And you can do configuration management testing. So you can review configuration aspect no matter how small to ensure that none are left at the default setting. that may be vulnerable to exploitation. Keep in mind that nothing is vulnerable. Sorry, that nothing can be hacked. Like everything is vulnerable. Just keep in mind. How much if you implement security, the hacker or attacker will find. They will do everything they can and find a way to exploit your application. So just focus on security part also. So let's stop a second. And did you remember these all things that we say? Not only me, that all the things also. So I know these things are very hard for you all because these things you have never seen these like secure development life cycle. Don't worry, we will provide the slides also. And most thing, if you have a doubt, use Google. That's the best thing you can do. Let's move to the phase 5. During maintenance and operations. So we need to conduct operational management review. Right, why is that? So we can see details how the operational side of both the application and infrastructure is managed. So and also monthly or quarterly health checks should be performed on both the application and infrastructure. So we can ensure no new security risks have been introduced and that the level of security is still intact after the deployment also. This will be called as conduct periodic health checks. So as the last step of last phase, we need to ensure change verification. So it's vital that if any change made is checked to ensure that the level of security has not been affected by the change. So this should be integrated into the change management process. I have provided the typical secure software development lifecycle. So all I explained before is here in this one picture. Just observe and get some idea. So guys, what do you know about OS top 10 list? It's a standard document for developers and web application security. I will provide the link also, you can refer them. So SQL injection vulnerabilities among this top 10 and also which we called SANS top 25 vulnerabilities. So definitely you need to give more attention to this vulnerability. Can you remember you have also learned about these things in IWT module security part. So now I am going to give you a brief idea about SQL injection. Simple SQL injection occurs when invalid data is sent by an attacker into a web application. The attacker's intent in doing so is to make the application do something it was not designed to do. Okay, so let's see how the SQL injection attacks impact on a web application. Like SQL injection vulnerability identifies most dangerous vulnerability. So try to give more focus on this. However, most of the time queries are not static. You will learn them in future also. They are indeed dynamically built by using users input. So in this example, you can like this code shows that using users applied input to build a query. Look at the ID parameter of the GET request here. The code, like when you have code like this, then the code submit the query to the database. So this behavior is very dangerous because a malicious user can exploit the query constructions to take control of the database interactions. Let's see how. First of all, let me say don't panic by seeing these things. They are just these are also just a PHP that you have learned and you will learn in future. Don't worry too much about these things, these codes. So the dynamic query in here. Here it expects ID value like such as 1, or we can use example as ID 2 or any other string. But if an attacker crafts a ID value which can change the query something in like this, so then your query then becomes like this: select name description from products were ID null or an always true condition. So like the two conditions were explained here. The ID must be empty, like ID equals null, or an always true condition. So while the first condition is not met, the SQL injection will consider the second condition of the OR. So this second condition is drafted as always true condition. So simply, in other words, this tells the database to select all the items in the products table. So let's see how can we avoid the SQL data disaster. So you should keep in mind that only select type queries can be, you mind that not only the select type queries can be vulnerable. I want to show you an example for that. So let's consider this query. Delete description from items where ID equals user applied value. Okay, so and also consider this injection like one before. So in such a case, every description field will be cleared, which means this type of injection we can do the permanent damage to your database. So how to avoid these things? You can positive whitelist server-side validation, or you can use limit or any other SQL controls within queries to prevent mass disclosure of records in SQL injection. So when using dynamic queries, you can escape the special characters and sanitize them. I will explain two or three methods how we can sanitize our code. So first one is input validation. The validation process is aimed at verifying whether not the type of input submitted by a user is allowed. Like input validation makes sure it is accepted by type, length, format, and other type of strings. So only the other types of variables, only the value which passes the validation can be processed. So it helps counteract any commands inserted if in the input string. So just like this, in a way, it is similar to looking to see who is knocking before opening the door. Like example, think like it is similar that looking to see who is knocking before opening the door. That is input validation. So validation shouldn't be only be applied to fields that allow users to type in input. Meaning you should also take care of the following situations like in equal measures. Like you can keep in mind, you can use regular expressions as whitelist for structured data, such as name, age, income, survey response, zip code, to ensure a strong input validation. Or in case of a fixed set of value, such as drop-down list, radio button, please keep in mind which value is returned. The input data should match one of the offered options exactly. So this table, how to carry out table name validation. The table name variable here, the table name variable can be directly appended. It is now widely known to be one of the legal and expected value for a table name. So in case of a drop-down list like this, it is very easy to validate the data. Like in here, assuming you want a user to choose a rating from 1 to 5, change the PHP code to something like this. This will help to prevent these vulnerabilities. So you can in these tables, you can add these simple checks like this. It must be a number. Okay, it's like it's here function is numeric. And also you require that number to be bigger than 0 and smaller than 6, which leaves you a range of 1 to 5, like it here. Just don't think too much about these codes. These are just examples to show you how to sanitize your code. Just you can refer the slide, so you can Google, or you can input these like methods to secure web application. So data is received from external party has to be validated. This rule applies not only to the input provided by internet users, but also to the your suppliers, partners, and vendors. So those vendors could be under attack and send malformed data even without their knowledge. So it is very important to validate your input. Move to the next slide. Avoiding administrative privileges. Let me keep this in short. Don't connect your application to the database using an account with root access. So this should be done only if absolutely needed, since the attackers could gain access to the whole system. So even non-administrative account server could place risk on the application. So even more, so if the database server is used by multiple application and databases, for that reason, it's better to if you can enforce least privilege on the database to defend the application against SQL injection. So ensure that each application has its own database credentials that those credentials have the minimum rights the application needs. So instead of trying to determine which access rights or elevated permissions your application needs, if a user only needs access to some parts, you could create a mode that strictly serves this function. You can find all these things in Google in detail. So two other methods like send query and parameters separately to the database. So SQL injection happens when an attacker sneaks additional database instructions into your existing query. So as I told before, there's a there's a famous example in smuggling drop table that we as pen testers use statement with an existing query. It is designed to maliciously destroy an entire database table. So this technique to prevent this type of attack is fairly straightforward. So it will isolate the data from the instructions designed to operate on it, then literally send them as separate message to the database server. So this allows the application to query the database server like so. If you say give me all the columns from students table for rows where the first name is as example John, I will send a separate message with something to fill in the blank. Then a very short time later, your application send them another message like another message like fill in that blank with John. So if the database server receives this like this kind of message, John, your username, drop table students, instead it won't execute the drop table statement because the database server knows that it's a value. So it won't let it alter the original instructions it received. So it will treat that value literally, search for a student name like your username John. So it will return nothing. Like on the next method, filter on output. So how do we handle user generated content that actually should be rendered on the front end? Consider blog post reader where the author writes a field. That rich text content is going to include a lot of HTML. How can you get the browser to safely render it? Filtering. Filtering is a secret technique that involves examining user supplied data, removing anything that shouldn't be there. So this is a high-wire act of web application security. So it's a can be used a tactic that should be reserved for a very narrow set of circumstances where escaping content doesn't make sense. So there's a lot that could go wrong here. So it is easy to aggressive in stripping HTML elements or not aggressive enough to fail to remove malicious input. So don't mind this thing. So save yourself the trouble and use a well-tested library like HTML Purifier. And I have given links also, and I will give these references links as links later. And as with escaping, you should apply this as late as possible. So it is not common to see applications attempt to filter and escape data coming to the application. This is what's often called sanitizing, but that should really be avoided. And you can do very much security. You can add very much security settings to your applications. So try them. I will provide some links also, references also. Mainly try the Google. Use the internet. It will provide so much valuable information how to secure a web application. Thank you. If you have any questions, you can ask now. Thank you very much, Shadini. It's up to you.